For the first time in his long and remarkable career, Jonathan Toews visits the United Center as an opposing player.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another game day preview edition of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcasting network where we bring you your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. On today's episode, I'll open up with everything to note for tonight's matchup against Jonathan Toews in the Winnipeg Jets at the United Center. Then I'll get into the latest updates on Frank Nazar's injury and when we could possibly see him return to the lineup. And then for segment 3, I'll also get into some updates on prospects like Anton Frondell, Sacha Boisvert, and Jack Pridham. But first, got to give a quick shout out here to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Before tip-off, go and check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, happy Monday, happy game day, Blackhawks fans, and it's set up to be another emotional night at the United Center after former Stanley Cup champions like Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Marian Hossa, Corey Crawford, and many more were in attendance for the Banner Years celebration on Saturday. The leader of those three Stanley Cup teams, and Jonathan Toews, returns to Chicago for the first time as an opposing player here tonight. And with that being the case, even though it is freezing temperatures out here in the Chicagoland area, hope everyone's bundled up and staying warm, I'm still expecting it to be a pretty packed house at the UC as one of the best Blackhawks to ever do it will be back in the building, and should be a lot of fun and also weird at the same time seeing him skate around the ice in another sweater. But as I've said all along on the show here over the last couple of years when Toews has been going through this battle, and then we got news that he was planning his return to the NHL, it's just so great to see him back doing what he loves and his body allowing him to do that on a consistent basis. And hey, Taser, after a little bit of a quiet start to his return, he's playing some pretty good hockey here to help the Jets be on a nice run coming into this matchup at the UC here tonight, as Toews has points in 8 of his past 12 games. Also was in the midst of a 4-game goal streak before that was snapped in the Jets' last time out on Saturday in an overtime loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But still, 4 goals in the last 5 games for Jonathan Toews. As I mentioned, a point in 8 of his last 12. And the Jets, after dropping their first 4 games of 2026, they're 4-0-1 in their last 5 coming into this one. So shaping up to be a memorable night at the UC. Hopefully the Blackhawks, though, can come out of this one with 2 points to avoid a clean sweep during this 4-game homestand, as they also fell 5-2 to the Boston Bruins on Saturday night to kind of spoil those banner year celebrations, as all the great past Stanley Cup champions bared witness to a pretty shaky final 40 minutes from the Blackhawks where they gave up 5 unanswered goals. Before I get into the Blackhawks projected lineup here tonight against Toews and his Jets, his hometown Winnipeg Jets, I should say, since I went through some of my favorite moments for all the past champions that were in the house at the UC on Saturday, wanted to go through some of my favorite moments from Jonathan Toews' historic tenure as a member of the Blackhawks. The number one moment that stands out to me when I think about Jonathan Toews is Game 7 of the Western Conference Final 2015 against the Anaheim Ducks. A win or go home game, obviously, with that being a Game 7. But that whole series against the Ducks, out of all the Blackhawks series that they had leading up to Stanley Cup championships, I think that one gave me the most amount of mini heart attacks. As the Ducks hit so many posts in that series. There were so many long overtime games. And of course, it all led up to that win or go home Game 7. And Jonathan Toews, what a start to put the Blackhawks ahead 2-0. 2 goals in the opening 10 games allowed them to go in advance to the Stanley Cup final against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where of course they won the title for the 3rd time in 6 years. Another maybe my favorite moment of Jonathan Toews' entire career, while obviously I started with the Game 7 Western Conference Final performance, I think that's one that will, add to his incredible Stanley Cup legacy and postseason resume. I think my favorite personal moment from Jonathan Toews is the 2011 shorthanded goal that he scored to even up Game 7 against the Vancouver Canucks. Blackhawks down 1-0 in that game. They're a man down with under 5 minutes to play, and Toews goes 1 against 3-4 skaters, gets knocked down to the ice, and still finds a way to knock home a loose puck and tie the game up 1-1. Now, unfortunately, Chris Campoli would go on to turn the puck over to Alex Burrows in overtime. The Blackhawks weren't able to beat Vancouver in the Stanley Cup playoffs for a third consecutive season, but I thought that goal perfectly captured what makes Jonathan Toews so special. You know, he wasn't the best playmaker. He wasn't the most productive offensive player, but he gave you heart and he gave you hustle and effort like no other on every single shift. And that perfectly caught what Jonathan Toews is all about. When you get knocked down to the ice, what do? You get back up and you keep on trudging forward, and found a way to get to that loose puck despite, having to battle through 3 or 4 Canucks defenders, like I just said. An iconic goal from Jonathan Toews' career that showed what he was all about. Another iconic moment for Jonathan Toews, one of my favorites as well, was the Game 5, another shorthanded goal scored from the captain. Breakaway overtime winner against the Blues to put the Blackhawks ahead 3-2 in that series in 2014. The Blues won the opening 2 games of that series to go ahead 2-0, but the Blackhawks go and take the last 4 to break their hearts once again. They would get the most recent last laugh, though, in 2016, but I still remember that call. Jonathan Toews, breakaway in overtime. He can win it. He does. Beautiful little backhand move, beating the goaltender 5-hole as he did so often on his breakaway chances or whenever he got an opportunity in the shootout. One of my favorite goals of Toews' career. Another iconic moment, obviously, was being part of the 2 goals in 17 seconds that the Blackhawks scored in Game 6 of the 2013 Stanley Cup Final against the Boston Bruins, setting up Brian Bickle for the game-tying goal. And then, of course, Dave Bolland, 17 seconds later, wound up potting the game winner. But a beautiful feed there from Toews from right below the goal line to find Brian Bickle out in front, snuck a shot right between Tuukka Rask's wickets for that game-tying goal. All started, though, with some great board work by both Duncan Keith and Jonathan Toews in the dirty areas. And then there's plenty of more moments that I could go through, but I thought just such an awesome one was the Blackhawks in 2015 finally winning the Stanley Cup on home ice and getting to see Jonathan Toews as the captain, being the first player, of course, to touch the cup and raising it in front of the fans at the United Center. They won in 2010 in Philadelphia. Then 17 seconds occurred in 2013 in Boston. So to win one and cap off the dynasty with the 3rd Stanley Cup in 6 years on home ice, seeing Jonathan Toews raise it in front of the chaotic crowd on tap at the United Center was a moment that I absolutely will never forget, as well as him passing it off to Kimmo Timonen, who, of course, was on the ice for Patrick Kane's Stanley Cup winning goal in 2010. Thought that was a pretty cool moment. Kimmo Timonen, by the way, one of the Blackhawks that was honored in Saturday's banner years celebration at the UC. So a lot of good memories that I'm sure we'll be watching as well on the Jumbotron tonight when Toews inevitably gets his video tribute. I'm sure there'll be tons of memorable and tear-jerking type of moments throughout the course of the game. Will be a lot of fun, and still also weird seeing number 19 back in the house this evening. But getting back to business here, as far as the Blackhawks projected lineup goes, as they try to snap their current 3-game losing skid and avoid being swept during this 4-game homestand. Man, really need 2 points here tonight in this one, in a game that's probably going to have some high emotions, I'm guessing. Unfortunately, the Blackhawks are still going to be without Teuvo Teravainen for a 3rd consecutive game. He was not on the ice for the morning skate due to his upper body injury. Still haven't gotten much of a timeline from head coach Jeff Blashill in terms of when he's going to be able to return. Frank Nazar, who I'll touch more on here in just a moment during segment 2, also is not going to play tonight, even though he's starting to make some noticeable progressions in his recovery. And unfortunately, the Blackhawks also could be without another key forward. And Andre Burakovsky wasn't participating at the morning skate due to an illness. I believe that's going around the Burakovsky household right now. And of course, his wife just gave birth not all that long ago. So hope everything's going good and everyone can feel better here soon for the Burakovskys. He's been listed as a game time decision. The Blackhawks aren't really sure if he's going to play one way or the other at the time of this recording, at least. And during the morning skate, it was Colton Dach who was up on the Blackhawks top line with Connor Bedard and Ryan Green. Obviously, not ideal there. Doc did open the season getting a little bit of time on the top line with Bedard, but obviously does not provide the same speed, playmaking, or just overall offensive skill set as Burakovsky does. So that would be another huge absence for the Blackhawks, especially when it feels like their lack of speed has really caught up with them here over the last, 4 to 5 games. They've dropped 4 of their last 5 now. And Andre Burakovsky, one of the fastest skaters in this forward group. Obviously, Frank Nazar is known for his wheels. Teuvo Teravainen, for as much flack as I've given him since returning to the Blackhawks, he can at least move at a fast pace. So replacing Burakovsky with Colton Dach is definitely not going to make life any easier for Connor Bedard, considering he would be the only one of those 3 that can really bring some fast skating ability to the table. And I think that's one reason why he and Burakovsky have worked pretty well with one another this season, is Burakovsky is able to keep up with Bedard and that added pace that he's added to his game here in his 3rd NHL season. So would definitely be a key absence, quite honestly. I'm not expecting Burakovsky to play tonight, even though he's been listed as a game time decision, but keeping my fingers crossed that he is not going to miss this one against the Jets. On the second line for the Blackhawks at the morning skate, Tyler Bertuzzi, once again with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. I mean, I get it, and I do give Jeff Blashill in general credit for keeping his forward lines and defensive pairings together to allow them time to build chemistry and not just like reactionary changing things up when maybe they don't need to be changed. And I feel like that's something that the Blackhawks head coaches in the past have maybe made poor decisions regarding, but I do feel like it's time to change things up. Now, obviously, it's not easy to go and do that when you're still down Nazar, you're now down Teravainen, and potentially down Andre Burakovsky as well. But I still feel like Bertuzzi's goal-scoring prowess, it's just being wasted here with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. There's not a lot of creativity on that line. Yeah, Mikheyev has speed, but he doesn't really, know what to do with the puck when he does get it on his stick in terms of setting up plays or creating anything in the offensive zone. So eventually, I just think you got to put your best playmaker back with your best goal scorer, Bertuzzi and Connor Bedard, as I talked about the last time I recorded a show on Saturday. Hard to see that coming here tonight, though, considering the injuries that the Blackhawks are still dealing with. So expecting Bertuzzi, despite my opinions on it, to remain with Dickinson and Mikheyev once again. Looks like Ryan Donato is going to be back with Oliver Moore and Nicky Lardis. That line hasn't really done all that much in their 2 games together. Did feel like at least they ended Saturday's game against the Bruins a little bit better than they started. And then down on the 4th line, Nick Foligno in that 4C spot, Landon Slaggert on the right wing. Feel like it's been a nice little stretch here for Landon Slaggert, but I think that probably goes to show you how poor the Blackhawks offense has been during these last 5 games when Landon Slaggert is one of their more notable forwards. Not a knock on him. It's just the reality, of the situation. But should Andre Burakovsky not play tonight, Blackhawks fans, that sets up Sam Lafferty to draw back in for the first time here in 2026. Last time he played was December 28th, I believe, or December 30th, 28th against the Penguins. Can't remember if he played against the Penguins last or if it was the final game of 2025 against the New York Islanders. Regardless, hasn't been in the lineup so far here in 2026. So should Burakovsky not play, that will allow Lafferty to get back in. And then defensively, no changes coming. Lafferty and Vlasic, Kaiser and Levshinov, Grzelcyk and Murphy. Do think it's interesting, though. All three of Artie Levshinov's highest time on ice games recorded this season have all come within the last 2 weeks. And during that stretch, I don't feel like he's been the best defensively, and the stats and analytics kind of back that up, but still getting a ton of ice time on the back end. I wonder if he's getting a little bit too much right now, if he's just in a little bit over his head. And I get, when you have Louis Crevier, who they still kind of shelter despite the success he's found this year. Connor Murphy, obviously, is an older player, doesn't get the ice time that he once did. The Blackhawks are a little bit thin on the right-hand side, and with Levshinov being their best offensive defenseman, and they need offensive support, I understand giving him a lot of ice time, but I do wonder, and I do want to ask Jeff Blashill about this after the game tonight, should Levshinov play, 23, 24 minutes once again. I do want to ask him if there's a line and whether Levshinov has crossed that in terms of too much ice time as a 20-year-old rookie, because I do feel like defensively things have not been trending well ever since he's been getting that uptick, but I do also understand why they've been playing him a little bit more, because they need his help in the offensive zone. And then in goal, it's going to be Spencer Knight after Arvid Soderblom got the start on Saturday against Boston, was another kind of outing out of Arvid, which is kind of the story of his career. Been a struggle, though, interestingly, for Spencer Knight in his career against the Winnipeg Jets. Only has 3 career starts against them, but has given up at least 4 goals in all of them, and has given up 6 in 2 of them, including the last time these two teams faced, the first of 4 meetings here this year. Tonight will be the second, and they'll meet 2 more times in March before the conclusion of the 25-26 campaign. In that game, it was one of, if you all remember, it was, I think, the first game of the season where Spencer Knight really didn't have his best stuff. This game was back on October 30th, just before Halloween, and Knight allowed 6 goals on 32 shots faced in what resulted in a 6-3 loss for the Blackhawks to kick off their road trip. And in his 3 career games against the Jets, he has a 5.34 goals against average. So hopefully he'll be able to kind of shed that bug for whatever reason he has against Winnipeg and put together a sturdier start here tonight to hopefully help the Blackhawks put an end to their current 3-game losing skid. All right, there is everything to note before tonight's matchup against Jonathan Toews in the Winnipeg Jets. Believe Jonathan Toews is going to be centering the Jets' second line, but at the time of this recording, the Jets are just now getting on the ice for the morning skate. But coming up in just a moment, make sure to stick with me, Hawks fans, as I'll get into when we can expect to see my guy, Frank the Tank Nazar, back in the lineup. But first, got to give a shout out to one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is now making them even better. Every Friday night before games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. An NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour, and the timing is absolutely perfect, right before the games and right before the weekend starts. So right before tip-off, go and check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder to please like and subscribe here on YouTube. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, would greatly appreciate you rating and reviewing. It's 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really does help me out in a big way in growing my platform. Segment 2, while Teuvo Teravainen remains out with an upper body injury and Andre Burakovsky could miss tonight's game, the Hawks actually did get some positive injury news recently regarding one of their key forwards, which is, of course, Frankie Nazar, who's been out since December 20th, with what we expect to be a broken jaw. He's missed each of the Blackhawks' last 13 games because of it. He will be out for a 14th game in a row here tonight against Toews and the Jets, but it does look like he could be back within the next 3 to 5 days here, Hawks fans, which definitely has me excited. Nazar participated in Saturday's morning skate ahead of the matchup against the Bruins. That was the first time where he had actually joined his teammates for a practice/morning skate type of scenario since suffering that injury on December 20th. We had seen him, skating on his own prior to Blackhawks practice, but that was the first time in which he actually joined the rest of the guys and took part in a couple of drills. Then yesterday, the Blackhawks held practice and Nazar was a full participant. Just like Saturday, he had shed the gray non-contact sweater, still wearing a half face shield though to protect, again, what we believe is a broken jaw. And then he was on the ice once again here this morning for the morning skate, donning the same things. The regular red Blackhawks normal practice sweater, still had the half face shield, and sure looks like he's making some good progress. And head coach Jeff Blashill, after yesterday's practice, said it's kind of getting to a we'll see type of situation for Nazar, which is kind of similar to what Blashill said before Connor Bedard returned. So I'm getting the feeling that Nazar's return to the lineup is right here on the horizon, Blackhawks fans. In the upcoming schedule for Chicago, following tonight's game against Winnipeg, the Hawks will have 2 days off. I don't think they're going to practice tomorrow. Likely will practice on Wednesday before that back-to-back, or maybe they practice tomorrow and then have the day off. Either way, they're going to practice one of these next 2 days before they return to action next for the front end of a back-to-back on Thursday in Carolina against the Hurricanes. Then they'll return home to the UC for a matchup with the Tampa Bay Lightning on Friday night. And then also on Sunday, they play the two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, where, by the way, Matthew Tkachuk, I believe, is expected to make his return and first appearance of the season for Florida here tonight. So expected to be in the lineup for that one. I'm expecting Frankie Nazar to be in the lineup for that one as well. And quite honestly, Hawks fans, I saw Ben Pope from the Chicago Sun-Times say on social media that he's getting the inkling that Nazar is going to return on Thursday in Carolina. I'm expecting him to be back for one of those two games in the Blackhawks back-to-back. I do wonder, I know he's fully participated in practice, but hasn't taken a lot of contact yet. I feel like how he looks in the Blackhawks' next practice session, whether that be Tuesday or Wednesday, is going to truly indicate when that return is going to be, whether it's Thursday in Carolina, Friday at home against Tampa Bay, or I think at the latest Sunday against the Florida Panthers. But like I said, I'm expecting Nazar to be back in the lineup probably for one of those two games in the back-to-back, and there's even a really good chance that he's in the lineup for the Blackhawks when they hit the road and take on the Carolina Hurricanes, a building in which they've really struggled in these last handful of years. So it would be nice to have Frankie Nazar and his speed back in the lineup for that one. And the Blackhawks have just desperately missed Nazar's speed and desperately missed having a second line center iceman. Obviously, he was also out before while Connor Bedard was out with that separated shoulder too. So technically the Hawks were down both of their two top line centers. But having a reliable second line center who can give you some sort of consistent production. And I know Nazar's play dipped, really ever since he suffered that initial lower body injury against the Calgary Flames in early November, right after the first meeting between the Hawks and the Jets this season. He really didn't look like the same player that he did in the opening 10 to 15 games of the season, but still with his speed and with his diverse game, someone who could play on the penalty kill, power play, help you enter the offensive zone with some speed, which has been a problem for this team. The Hawks could use Nazar back in a lot of different ways. So very positive that he's starting to make some serious progressions here, and the Blackhawks are going to be getting him back for the Olympic break. I know there was kind of some concern about that a few weeks ago based on some comments offered up by Jeff Blashill, but looking like Frankie Nazar is going to be in the lineup either on Thursday against Carolina or Friday against Tampa Bay. But do want to talk for a quick moment about what the Blackhawks will do with the lineup when Nazar does return, because I really think it's a fascinating discussion. Obviously, the most likely situation is they're going to throw him back into that second line center spot. However, and I do think Nazar is going to be back at the center position, but Oliver Moore, I feel like, has played his best hockey down the middle. You obviously have Jason Dickinson, who's going to be playing center ice for as long as he's with the Blackhawks. And then you have Nick Foligno as the fourth line center, and he's done a pretty decent job at the dot so far this year as well. It's more so if you're going to be playing Frank Nazar at center, like I expect them to do, you probably can't be playing Oliver Moore at the center ice position as well. And I do think the Blackhawks long-term would like Frank to be a center, probably more so than Oliver Moore, but I'm really interested to see, if they are going to give Moore some additional looks down the middle, they could do that more so once Jason Dickinson gets traded, which is likely to be the case. And then B, assuming Moore does go to the wing initially when Nazar returns, is he able to provide the same impact or at least look as sharp as he has here over these last couple of weeks while playing on the wing? Because even Blashill said, Ollie might have just not been sure of himself in terms of how to utilize his speed effectively when playing that position. It feels like it's come a little bit more natural to him here down the middle. So really interested to see how Blashill is going to handle that, as well as just the forward lines in general. And Teuvo Teravainen being out right now, I think makes things a little bit easier, but it's still a bit of a complex matter. So I've been outspoken about, putting Tyler Bertuzzi back up on the top line with Bedard and Burakovsky, but I'm guessing that Blashill, with how he's handled things, he's going to continue the Green, Bedard, Burakovsky trio even when Nazar returns. Just kind of guessing the line combinations, that would put Tyler Bertuzzi on the second line with Frank Nazar. Frankie's played a ton with Teuvo Teravainen this year, but obviously he's out of the lineup right now. Who do you play as the other winger on that line, assuming Nazar and Bertuzzi do play together on the second line? You could go Oliver Moore there on the wing. Quite honestly, though, I think I'd give Nick Lardis an opportunity on that second line and see what his goal scoring ability can do. Also has the speed to keep up with Nazar in transition, which is really the one thing that Tyler Bertuzzi is lacking. And the reason I'm giving Nick Lardis that spot over Oliver Moore is because I do think Ollie would still be a really good fit on the third line with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev with the pace that he can play. I know his defense maybe hasn't been as sturdy as we wanted to see, or at least as consistent, but those are still things that happen to a rookie player in this league. And I feel like altogether, with his speed and at least the effort that he provides, I think that would be a good fit along with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev. And instead of having Ryan Donato there, I think you'd want to have Oliver Moore a little more up in the lineup as opposed to having him down on the fourth line. And we've seen Ryan Donato play on the fourth line a decent amount this year, along with Nick Foligno and Colton Dach, or Landon Slaggert and Colton Dach. Even though Ryan Donato has the abilities to offer a little bit more, that's just the reality of the Blackhawks situation. You want to be giving the young players like Nick Lardis and like Oliver Moore those opportunities. But once Teuvo Teravainen returns, then what do you do, Blackhawks fans? Because I don't think you want to have Nick Lardis down on the fourth line. I don't think you want to have Colton Dach as an extra on the outside looking in. It's probably getting towards that time where the Blackhawks got to make a move. And likely for this forward group, it's going to be Jason Dickinson, just so that they can open up a center ice spot. Obviously is an expiring deal, and with kind of some of the nagging injuries for many different reasons, ultimately, I really believe it's going to be time to move off from Jason Dickinson. But until that point comes, and again, we're not sure that we don't know how long Teuvo Teravainen is going to be out for, but regardless, once Nazar returns, once Teuvo returns, like, there are going to be fascinating decisions that need to be made by head coach Jeff Blashill in this front office. And I'm very excited to see how it's going to pan out. But for me personally, if Frankie's back on Thursday, I would go with Tyler Bertuzzi and Nick Lardis as his line mates. I think it makes a lot of sense to put Lardis in an offensive situation. I also think it makes sense to put Oliver Moore with Jason Dickinson and Ilya Mikheyev as opposed to dropping him down on the fourth line. But we're going to have to wait and see. Based on, if Nazar is going to return on Thursday, I'm guessing he'll probably be involved in line rushes on Wednesday. We'll have a good idea of what Jeff Blashill is thinking in terms of the line combinations by then. But there is the latest on a nearing return for my guy, Frank the Tank Nazar. Will miss a 14th consecutive game in a row here, but hopefully this is the last game that he'll be out from that facial injury. Coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, still want to get into a quick update on several Blackhawks prospects. Real quick, got to give a shout out to another one of today's sponsors, though, in Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, go and trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Are you hiring? Then Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites, because Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. And sponsored jobs boosts your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results by using Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show, you'll get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. All you got to do is go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and make sure to support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Then Indeed is all you need. Just want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your week. Segment 3, before closing things out, wanted to get into what's been going on recently with several Blackhawks prospects as it continues to be a productive season from many of them. Got to start first, though, with Sacha Boisvert, who had himself quite an interesting weekend as he got into a fight with Connor Eddy of UMass Lowell on Friday night. And of course, fighting is not allowed in college hockey, but boy, I'm kind of glad that these two guys wound up dropping the helmets and throwing some fists, because it was a big heavyweight tilt. And Sacha Boisvert, who I've talked about on the show in the past, has a boxing background. I believe his father owns a boxing gym, and he's someone who has a notoriously strong work ethic. puts in the work off of the ice, and his boxing background came into play during this scrap that he had with Connor Eddy on Friday. Now, to be fair, Connor Eddy landed some big shots of his own. They both were throwing bombs back and forth. College hockey, though, surely wasn't too happy about those two players dropping the gloves, and that has landed Sacha Boisvert a 2-game suspension, which quite honestly, I thought it was going to be 3, 4, maybe even 5 games, considering how college hockey has outlawed this type of stuff and how they've kind of handled some situations in the past. 2 games, I feel like definitely could have been worse for Sacha Boisvert. But very, very interesting moment from a former first-round pick for the Blackhawks over the weekend. Has not been the most productive offensive season out of Sacha Boisvert, though, with the Terriers, which I expected him to be as their top-line center, potentially in the Hobey Baker race with the way that his freshman season went with North Dakota. Still having a fine season, 14 points in 16 games. Only 3 goals, though, and I know one of those was an empty netter that he scored the weekend prior, so hasn't been all that productive at even strength. However, despite maybe not the ideal sophomore season out of Boisvert, the expectation is, according to Frank Nazar, who joined CHSN prior to the Blackhawks game last Monday against the Edmonton Oilers, he said that the expectation is still for Sacha Boisvert to sign his entry-level contract after his sophomore season wraps up, and then for him to go and join the Blackhawks. And some of you may remember one of my bold predictions that I gave out at the beginning of the season was that Sacha Boisvert is going to ink his entry-level contract with the Blackhawks, and he's going to score his first NHL goal before the end of the season. Well, still looks like that's in the cards. Of course, it also depends on what transpires with Boston University's season in terms of the timeline and whether Sacha will be able to get into games. If Boston University does make a run to the national championship, that might not allow for Sacha to make his NHL debut with Chicago. I don't have the dates, right out in front of me, but the longer that he plays with the Terriers, the longer that his sophomore season goes, the less action that he's going to be getting with the Blackhawks. However, it hasn't been the strongest season for Boston University, but can never count them out when March rolls around. But would still be very excited, obviously, as someone who's really gassed up Sacha Boisvert on this podcast the last couple of years. Very excited to see what he has in store. Now, won't likely be coming to the NHL with as much momentum as maybe I had hoped. But regardless, Saravalli mentioned the Blackhawks are still feeling like he can be a top 6 piece here in this rebuild. I've said he could be a strong 2-way second liner who also has a booming shot. Not the fastest skater in the world, not the best playmaking instincts, but brings a good work ethic, has some good size, responsible on the defensive side of things. And then his best offensive attribute is definitely the powerful shot that he possesses. So I could see Sacha Boisvert being a second line winger, going to be a middle six puzzle piece, though. I do believe in this Blackhawks rebuild. Going to be having the next couple of games off, though, with Boston University, as he has been suspended for fighting Connor Eddy from UMass Lowell on Friday night. Also, another player expected to return pro after the conclusion of the season, of course, is the 3rd overall pick in 2025, Anton Frondell, named the best forward at the 2026 World Junior Championship, even though maybe had the voting gone down after the gold medal game, that might not have been the case. Still was an awesome tournament from Frondell. Over the weekend, he scored his 12th goal of the season in the SHL, as he has now returned to Yeargarden, and he has posted 18 points in his opening 28 games this year. Been an awesome year out of Frondell, despite kind of being utilized in a lot of weird ways. But Saravalli also mentioned recently on a CHSN pregame show that, yeah, Frondell is going to be joining the Blackhawks. It just depends on whenever his season is going to come to a close in the SHL. But 2 additions to be very excited for later on in the year, Blackhawks fans, and Sacha Boisvert and Anton Frondell. Merrick Van Acker, another player who likely is going to be his final year in the Ontario Hockey League. And what a final year it's been for him thus far. Still feel like he got snubbed from Canada's World Junior roster, but he became the first player to reach 30 goals in the 25-26 season in the OHL with his 30th tally on Saturday night. Obviously, still leads the league in that category, is also 11th in the OHL with 51 points on the season, just keeps doing his thing. Giving him a run for his money, though, in terms of the league leader in goals, is fellow Blackhawks prospect Jack Pridham, who has flipped a switch over the last month or so, Blackhawks fans. It was a little bit of a quiet start to the season for him with the Kitchener Rangers. Not the case any longer. He netted a hat trick over the weekend and now has 28 goals on the season, tied for second in the league. So not only do the Blackhawks have the leading goal scorer in the OHL, they got the guy who's right behind him and making a charge for that number one spot as well. And actually in points, Pridham is the one who has the edge over Merrick Vanacker as he's ninth with 52 points on the season. And something I don't know if I've talked enough about with Jack Pridham this season is he's another guy who, like Merrick Vanacker, plays on the penalty kill for his club in the OHL. And Pridham doesn't have a ton of great size. Vanacker is the bigger of the two players, but with his skating ability and at least I like to see a player of his caliber who's more known for his offensive abilities. That might not translate over at the next level. And the Blackhawks, I mean, yeah, you'd love to have as many offensive weapons as you can, but considering the Blackhawks prospect pool, probably another top pick in 2026 who will likely be a forward. Like, they're not going to really need Jack Pridham to be a point per game type of guy. They're going to need him to be a well-rounded player who can make an impact in lots of different ways. So as someone who has done some good work on the penalty kill this year, is among the OHL leaders in shorthanded goals, that's stuff I love to see out of Jack Pridham in his final year of OHL hockey. And then last but certainly not least, yet to mention this on the show, Teuvo Teravainen, of course, he's dealing with an upper body injury, kind of puts his status in jeopardy a little bit. He's not going to be the only Olympian, though, should he be able to return prior to that point. He won't be the only Olympian for the Blackhawks, as goaltender prospect Adam Gajan was named to Team Slovakia a couple of weekends ago. So shout out to Gajan. Expected to be the third goaltender on the roster, but still should be a great experience for him, like it was for Drew Comesso a couple of years ago when he got to go and play for the United States in the Olympics back when NHL players still weren't taking part in the tournament. But it's been a really savvy year for Adam Gajan, and his sophomore season of college hockey with the University of Minnesota Duluth has been a big part why they've gone from a preseason unranked team into regulars inside of the top 10. He's 15-7-0 with a 2.12 goals against average and .911 save percentage so far here as a sophomore. I'm guessing he's going to be going back to college hockey for at least 1 year, but the turnaround that Gajan has had after a struggle-filled freshman season also wasn't very good in his first year after being drafted in the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers. He's found his footing and been one of the better goaltenders in all of college hockey this season, and we'll see if he gets any opportunities to represent Slovakia in the Olympics here next month. All right, that is going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, and even if you're someone who regularly watches on YouTube, make sure you're following Locked On Blackhawks for 100% free as well, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can tune into the latest episode wherever it may be on your way to work, in traffic, during your lunch break, whatever is the case. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2. My Strictly Blackhawks account, though, is at Talkin' Hockey. Give that one a follow so you don't miss any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, go Hawks. Let's go and pick up 2 points in what's shaping up to be another memorable night at the UC. Let's go and get 2 points over Johnny Toews and the Jets to put an end to that losing skid. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, stay warm. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.